What do you do when the business you poured everything into starts to crumble and you realize you built it wrong from the start? Stay tuned for another great episode of Bad Boss Confessional. Hi, I'm Beth Fahey, and this is Bad Boss Confessional, where real leaders get honest about the mistakes that made them better. Before we dive in, a quick thank you to our sponsors for making this show possible. Do you love running on EOS? Try Streti, the EOS platform people love. Native integrations and extra features help you manage people, projects, process, and engagement. Connected to your favorite EOS tools and all in one place. You love EOS. It's time to love the platform you're running it on. Try Streti free at streti.com. That's STRETY.com. Streti, the EOS platform people love. Let's be honest, hiring the right people is hard. That's why I love Titus Talent Strategies. Their whole person hiring approach helps you find and keep A players who align with your values, and they back it with an industry-leading guarantee. Best part? Titus Talent Strategies is included in the entrepreneurial toolkit for companies running on EOS. Check them out at titustalent.com/EOS. My guest today has spent over 12 years implementing EOS full-time, helping privately held companies build world-class cultures, and his clients have been recognized as best place to work more than 200 times. He's also the founder and president of GoXpand and Business Sergeant, businesses that support entrepreneurs on their entrepreneurial journey. Welcome to Bad Boss Confessional, Chris Hallberg.
Thanks for having me, Beth. It's great to be here on your show.
It's great to have you. We had such a fun time at our expert implementer retreat, and I got to know you a little bit better. But I'd love for our guests to know who you are, and if you wouldn't mind giving us a 1-minute history of your career before you became an implementer, because when you're telling your story, your confession today, I want them to be able to ground themselves in that story. So.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So I've had a couple different careers. I would say the EOS years, we'll call those the third chapter, which is pretty exciting, right? Who can do the same thing their entire life? You got to reinvent yourself, at least if you have the level of ADD that I possess. And as a side note, I think I looked at LinkedIn before EOS, and every 2.5 years you saw me doing something else. And I looked at this pattern. I thought, that's really weird. Every 2.5 years. So since the EOS thing, that's the longest thing I've ever done as being an EOS implementer. So that says a lot about the work that we do and how exciting and dynamic and additive to the world. And anyways, that's my little commercial about how much I love doing EOS. So before those years, I had a career in uniform. So I served for 9 years as a part-time citizen soldier in the Army National Guard Military Police. And full-time, starting at a super maximum security prison, 5 stories underground when I was 20. And by 23, I transferred to a medium security facility where I became a sergeant at the tender age of 23 years old, managing an entire cell block of convicted felons, many of those murderers, rapists, like the worst of the worst, and managing officers in their 30s, 40s, and 50s at the ripe age of 23, being the sergeant, being in control. I got out of all those uniforms in 1999 and got into construction sales, sales management, became a sales executive, then a business owner a couple of times over, had a successful exit in 2011, when I sold my energy efficient remodeling business in Minneapolis, St. Paul, where you need some extra insulation if you've ever been there in February. So I joined EOS back in 2014, talked to a guy named Don Tinney on the phone, and had me come to boot camp where I learned from a guy named Gino Wickman and was implementer number 50 something, I think, back at the time. And now we're, well over 900 worldwide. And have been a member of the Wolf Pack, a longest standing EOST group. That's been about 11 or 12 years we've been doing the Wolf Pack. So that's kind of like my journey and arc. And I know you well through the EOS community, and super stoked to be on your show today. I've been watching episodes and really love the content.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's great to have you here, especially somebody who's been around from really early days. And we've changed so much. I think I was like implementer 243 or something like that. So now it just seems like, at the time it felt like we were getting so big, and looking back, I mean, it was very manageable then. And and now it's like this worldwide thing. So anyway, you must have lots of stories. I would love to hear your stories, but let's go back from before you were an implementer. And we talked before the podcast, and you have an interesting story that you want to tell around structure. And to me, that is like one of the most key things for my clients to really figure out. So, would you mind sharing that story with us?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So structure first, people second. I've heard that somewhere. I'm trying to remember where I heard that, but yeah. So after I had exited that energy efficient remodeling business, it was a quick exit. It wasn't a well thought out, let's package for sale. And the business was only a couple of years old. But as a flaming visionary, not really understanding the visionary integrator concept, right? I learned that once I became an implementer. I was like, oh, that's why I didn't enjoy TPS reports and HR meetings and, production schedules and things like that. I like sales. I liked marketing. I liked building the brand, creating things and marshaling people and moving things around the earth. That's what got me satisfaction. So I started the business in 2009, which is still Great Recession era. And it wasn't a time to start a high ticket energy efficient remodeling firm. At least it seemed like those types of firms were going out of business, not into business. But I had found an interesting thing with where we went real into the energy efficiency. I found a Greenpeace city manager to help me knock doors to help save energy, because conservation is like the greenest thing you can do, right? Like just use less, not to mention it's quiet, it's comfortable, there's an ROI on the energy savings. So the business was highly successful when others weren't. So like within 3 months of starting, we were in the top 3 in building material sales, and everyone's like, what is going on here? Because I just went at it differently from the environmental angle and found people that would knock doors at night in the cold in Minneapolis to get leads. No one had leads because the cost for a lead went from like $250 a lead to like $2,500 a lead. And that's why companies couldn't market in that thing. So we created something that went with the times, the $1,500 tax credits, the whole windows for smart people, and targeted certain neighborhoods, that had the demographic and the spend, and voila, we were successful. So I made some noise, and one of the manufacturers that I was representing said, hey, this is like a bright spot in a bunch of dark. What are you doing? We would like to buy you. We would like to buy how you do it. And we'd like to bring you to other markets to show people this new way, because this is working and other things aren't. So, of course, like, wow, that's big visionary. That sounds exciting, going to a bunch of places and showing people what I did. So long story short, no names, no faces. I think I signed an NDA, so I'll have to, it was a while ago though, so I think I'm good. And I joined this partnership, and we were all a third. Everyone brought the same, 100,000 to the table, and everything was equal. And I kind of know the other 2 partners had a pretty good business relationship, but felt it was impartial enough where it wasn't going to be that risky. And but what I found out very shortly after, okay, it's time to make some big decisions, that those 2 voted together lockstep, like the entire way. And I had some contrarian opinions, and 66.6, carries 33.3. So basically, I sold my company fast, probably sold it cheaper than I should have had I found like the right buyer, and it wasn't just a quick, let's go do this joint venture thing. So, all the things that I had built, all the structure, didn't listen to anything, entrepreneur in heat. This is going to be big. We're going to be billionaires, right? Create this whole new way, not just the part that worked. They wanted to do some other tech stuff where it didn't require an estimator. It was all done on a computer. So we actually pulled off the technology. It was the coolest thing ever. The problem was we were in this echo chamber where everyone in this industry looked at it and said, this is the best thing ever. You guys are going to be billionaires. Well, everyone outside the industry is like, oh, this looks complex, or that's not how people do it. So the first lesson was don't vet ideas with people that are nerds like you are, right? Because everyone is in this echo chamber and everyone else thinks everyone else has this experience. Not the case. The actual demographic for my service was females 35 to 65. And the only one I had bothered to show that was my wife. And she, of course, said, oh, it's too complicated. Why don't you just do that? And I'm just like, oh, silly. And turns out, a little later into the business, we got a focus group, right? And they pretty much said exactly what my wife did. So that, like, I really started to listen to her a little closer after losing, I don't know, $250,000 of our dollars on some crazy visionary idea with partners who wanted to do it this way. And this was my vision. Like, no, we got to keep going. And basically, I wasn't in control. I was the visionary. They had, the ops and the finance, and, businesses don't run on pure unadulterated vision. They run on payroll and lines of credit and manufacturing schedules and development schedules and software and all this other stuff. So it was really interesting to be like, I got so in the ether of interrupting a space that I thought really needed to be interrupted that I just kind of let everything else go and focused on my lane. But when it was time to make calls, I didn't have the shares. We went the other way. So I'm like, oh, so I did all this just to have a job. Didn't I start a company because I was unemployable? And now I'm kind of a passenger, not in the driver's seat of my very own vision. So that was like the day I kind of realized all this was coming to head. It was like, oof, I sold my house for a loss. I moved my family across the country. The sun didn't shine where we went. My family's like, what's going on? I'm stressed out. I'm not having fun. Clearly, the assumptions we made as a business and how it actually played out, long story short, they're like, everyone, we did this big piece of technology, and this would be so great if we didn't have to have 5 hours and a bright light and a rubber hose to close these window deals. And I heard that. So I thought, well, it's probably 20% of the market. Well, it's more like 3% of the market. And to reach 3% of any market is incredibly expensive. So the education of trying to change how replacement windows and other products were sold, it was a beautiful idea, but it was 5 to 10, maybe 15 years too early. And we probably needed $1 billion to change how people do something. And we had, $1 million. So it was a lot of assumptions were tested, and all the employees at this company ended up not doing well after someone else took over. And then all the new employees to the new adventure. It was a very short ride. It was about a year of like, yeah, no one wants this. So when I talk about my Bad Boss Confessional here, I let down, 20 some people on one side and probably an equal number on the other side because I just didn't have the control. So I was going along with things I didn't 100% agree with. And because of that, maybe my commitment wasn't a 10 out of 10. And that might have shown through. And I had just gotten the structure correct and had the votes. I think it would have ended a little bit better. I still don't think we were going to change how something was done for those reasons I listed. But it could have been a nicer experience for everyone versus I had to go up on people and, hey, I got to let you go. Well, why? Well, I don't think I have to. It's not my call. It's been decided. I apologize. I know I said this and I really believe that, but now new information. Ultimately, I'm not 100% in charge of this. So that's that's unfortunate. I apologize. But so having to let go some really great people that had been loyal and high performers for a number of years, they took the leap with me. They took some risk, and ultimately I didn't have the say. So that was my failure as a leader, and vowed, and if I'm ever going to do something again, and I'm going to put my name on something, I'm going to have majority ownership, or I'm just going to be an advisor. And a board seat is different than, being at the head of a company making decisions, and ultimately they're not yours. So that's my confessional. I confess I did that, and it was horrible, and I was very sad. But it was a tremendous learning experience, Beth. I would argue it's really hard to teach somebody with a bunch of money in the bank and 4 or 5 recent successes, not a great listener. Boy, was that humbling to lose a large share of one's life savings, take stability and create instability, and kind of put it all together and figure out, at first I was probably just a victim. This is crazy. I can't believe this happened to me. And then, as you sit in your failure and stew there for a bit, marinate in that failure stuff, that's where I was like, oh, yeah. Well, maybe when someone said, hey, what about this? Nah, you don't understand. This is big. This is going to be like being so convinced it was going to be good, getting rid of all commonsensical and just going. And then when I reviewed my, quick aside here, because it's relevant, it's germane to this. They talk about airplane crashes, okay? It's not like, oh, look, a mountain, oh, we crash. That's not how airplane crashes happen. It's 3 to 5 bad decisions strung together in series till you get to a place where it's like, oh boy, now we're in trouble. It's rarely one mistake. It's a bunch of mistakes that maybe don't look so big, but when you put them together, the totality is big enough where, oh boy, we're going to crash. And that's what it was. And I had to kind of separate the ego and the pride and the hurt and the shame and the guilt, and coming off of touching several things and having them turn 24 karat in a row, taking that hubris into this one big thing and getting my ass completely handed to me. You learn a lot more when you're losing, not when you're winning. That was my cut you down a notch, several rungs on the ladder, professionally, financially, spiritually. Just, why is this happening to me? So that was a great Bad Boss experience. And after that, like I said, I'm like, wow. And then, of course, after is people like, yeah, I kind of told you that. I'm like, yeah, I don't think I was really listening back then. I'm like, no, I definitely didn't listen to me. I noticed that too.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because that's such a common thing that, as you're telling the story, I'm thinking of 6 or 7 different instances where, visionaries, we're very convincing, and we can convince the heck out of ourselves about ideas.
You're not lying. I was sold. I was so sold that people were trying to help me and bring up some contrarian ideas that would have actually helped the business. But I was just offended that they couldn't see the greatness inherently involved in this. And that small thinking, I've got no time for that realistic, real stuff. I'm up here 70,000 feet on oxygen thinking I got it all figured out. Yeah, that about sums it up.
Yeah, exactly. And and the thing is as you said in your story, is you've had a track record. You've actually succeeded. And a lot of the times you are directing the team into a good place. But if you don't have a governor, i.e. an integrator in your business, it can become really dangerous. And I know I certainly made a lot of boneheaded decisions. A lot of my ideas were really good. And then there were the couple of clunkers, which, threatened our reputation and other things. So, I've been where you're at. So this particular situation, it's so rich with so many of the things that we see our clients experience, falling in love with an idea, or a really driven visionary, ego. You've got the lack of control, control the controllables. Sometimes when you don't have things that you can control, like your votes, that's another area that I see frequently. Complexity, adding a lot of complexity where simplicity would actually be a better choice. And then just betting the house, literally.
Literally, yeah, not the proverbial house, the house. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, so many of those things, and they all sort of came together at a time where I'm sure that it wasn't the best time. How did you recover from this particular situation? What did you go and do next? And, like, what were the stories that you told yourself in your next iteration?
Well, after that, like divine timing, I get this phone call from a guy that used to work for me at the last place I was employable as the VP of sales and marketing. And this young sales manager who was very successful for me, created his own business and was doing like 8 million in its first year of operation with no process, all friends and family, like new Range Rovers, and don't cash your check until next Tuesday, not this Friday. So really, like, I just got this, hey, what are you doing this right now? I'm like, licking my wounds. What are you doing? I'm about ready to go to jail because I own, the supply house $500,000, and I can't like get to these jobs. They've already given me the deposits. I don't know what's going on here. So it was like, would you please come help me? Like, I don't want to get in trouble, and I want to do this right. And I got it. So it was basically save me from ruin, and get this thing back on track. So I took this opportunity to fly out to Denver, Colorado, where I'd landed and I'm still today. And I helped this gentleman get things right, get all the little old ladies their roofs built or their deposits back. Like, I think he's still paying off the supply house, but I think he's almost done with that. Everything was satisfied, built all the stuff, had to like personal guarantees and really move things around. So it was really, really difficult, but it was like the perfect thing. Let work on somebody else's messed up thing. You messed up your other thing. This isn't your mess, but you've got a shovel or you've got a broom. Come help this. So it was kind of like penance to get back into the business world and, do it right, get it fixed. And while I was doing that, I had a conversation with a previous business partner, Andy, who was in Minneapolis, and he had hired an implementer in the early days to do EOS in Minneapolis. He's like, wow, you should look at this EOS thing. This is like brought my construction. You could probably use that out where you're at in Colorado. That thing's pretty wild. So of course I looked into it and, fixed the company, and that was kind of winding down, and, met Don Tinney. And if everybody's met to Don Tinney, he's pretty convincing. He could read the phone book and you'd be signing up for something. So I was like, well, I'm rolling off of this, and I really do like this coaching thing. Like, to have all the great ideas and say, I'll see you later. Like, that sounds good, rather than having a desk growing out of my chest and doing integrator things as a flaming visionary. Just took the fun out of all this. So I thought, wow, this is really exciting. So of course I go to EOS boot camp and I'm like, why didn't I use that? Why didn't I use that? So the whole thing was like, duh, I could have found this 3 or 4 years ago and I wouldn't be here. I'd be doing this other thing, probably a whole lot better than I did making it up, pulling things out of thin air. So then I basically took that and started doing EOS here in Denver as the first EOS implementer in the community. Now we have about like 43, 44 implementers. So Denver is definitely a hot area of EOS. But as I went through the EOS training, man, if I could have had $1 for every time I kicked myself and like, where was this? So most implementers have a similar story, right? I did it the hard way, and now I help you do it the easy way with these amazing tools. So that's a little bit of that.
Yeah. Or you did it like I did, which was halfway, like, yeah, we did most of it. and then and then you start teaching it. So if you want to learn something, teach it. That's why we emphasize that in the rollout book, because you really will get better at it just by teaching it. And I joke with my clients, I don't think that I ever IDS'd properly until I became an EOS implementer.
Oh, I've talked to a lot of EOSIs, and they're kind of like, yeah, like everyone has that, man, if I had EOS, I really could have had a bigger exit, or maybe I wouldn't have sold, or man, a lot of people would still be a lot happier than they are now, or, just like you're making it up as you go along without an operating system. And sometimes that really great things happen, and that gives you the false confidence to double down on that and lean further into that. But, like Vegas, that beautiful shining city, was built on like a quarter or 0.5% odds. So like you don't want to play the odds game with big business decisions at scale or volume, because that's why there's a green zero and a green double zero. So just by having a third color a little bit is enough to take the roulette wheel and change the odds, right? So that was kind of my lived experience, and that's why I'm such a big fan of EOS. Is listen, that story where I lost all that money and everything I thought was this was that, and the humbling, eat whatever sandwiches from 8 in the morning until 8 at night. Like I was completely changed by that, humbled by that, and saw that, wow, a holistic, simple operating system to help you align and synchronize all the moving parts of your business. Yeah, that could have been helpful during a very complex, no one's ever done this before moment. So not only are you just creating a new category, you're doing it without any real systems and control. Like, how could that not be successful? Now that I look back on it, but at the time was like, let's go. So now when people are about ready to do something like, hey, we're thinking about getting into this business. And I'll be like, well, tell me about your experience in that business, right? And you're like, kind of like, why don't you just put that $1 million into something you already do that you're good at? Like, duh. And they're like, yeah, that just doesn't sound fun. I'm like, story time. And then I give them that story I just gave you, maybe a little bit more raw or a little bit more detail if they want it. And they're like, yep, let's go ahead and let's get the Texas plant a little bit larger. I like that idea. Like I tell the story, and they're like, "Ooh, that didn't sound like fun. Maybe we shouldn't do that." So that lesson that I paid handsomely for, I get to use that with clients and now with your podcast to let people know. Like, you can't see yourself as that person while you're that person. That's the big takeaway. That's the thing. And when you show the exact demographic of what it is, and they give you very, very good feedback, and you don't take it, you kind of got it coming. So, you know what I mean? Thank you, sir. May I have another? It really forced me to spot the same level of hubris and say, hey, I'm just going to go ahead and insert myself here. Are you open for a little feedback? I was in the exact same position. What I'm seeing right now looks identical to the thing that I fell in. And this is what I want you to look at. Have that conversation. A week later, get a call from a visionary. Yeah, we're not doing it. And I'm happy now. I was really upset with you that you were slowing my roll, but your story and some of the early things that you missed, we just used your story and went over those exact points, and we dug deeper. And that's why it's a no, because we were going to fail like you did, but we don't have to because you shared that. So thank you. So I was like, all right, ROI on the lesson. Like, you just put it in and it comes out the other side later. So this is how I turn those lemons into lemonade. And I'll share that and other stories. Because again, you learn more from losing than you do from winning. I prefer winning, and I think most people do, but a little bit of losing is good for your soul too.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it just makes you a better decision maker in the future when, once again, you fall in love with another idea. Because if you're a visionary, another one's going to come along. It's, they come like this. And yeah, we have very similar story. Added a cafe to a very successful existing bakery operation. So when we start talking core focus stuff, I always use that as my example. I'm like, did I ever tell you the story about the bakery owner that thought it would be a great idea to add a cafe to their existing business? And they're like, is that your story, Beth? And then they listened, right? And it's so good to have those stories. You've bled the blood, you've, lived it. And it's something that people can hang on to then, because otherwise it's just theory.
Yeah, stories are, yeah, the best.
I could read a book, and and we're here to help, right? And part of the acceleration that we provide to a business that decides to invest in an implementer is that experience. And it's not like we're there to be wet blankets. We're there to ask the tough questions that then make them go do the homework that they need to do in order to figure out what the real path should be, right?
Yeah,
So,
and I've got some crazy visionaries. One that just put me on the board, and now I have an actual vote to be like, yeah, outside of the core focus, absolutely crazy. Stop talking about this right now. And that's why I want you on the board, because like like everyone else works for this entrepreneur and profits from their benevolence, and I'm off to the side, doing just literally being impartial. This isn't good for me. This isn't bad for me. This is like what my duty is. Fiduciary is just to call the balls and strike. Ball. What do you mean? That's a strike. No, outside edge. Not even like whatever that is. And having learned those lessons, I think makes you a better advisor, right? For sure. And not just if you've ever had a failure at a business, I don't want you to coach me. I only work with winners. Like, imagine someone who said that. You'd be like, oh, you're in the middle of this arc right now with that statement. You are deep down the rabbit hole. I hope you got some breadcrumbs on the trail, because you're down there a ways. So I don't know. I think if anything, but at the same time, like, when you're humble and you learn these assumptions, and maybe I wasn't a great boss. Maybe I should have listened a little bit more. And, maybe I should have listened to a few of my own people along the way that brought things up, and just kind of speed bump them, as a lot of visionaries do, just drive on over. And I think ever since that moment, it's like, all right, before we run off the cliff, does anyone want to call it something that's really obvious to them, but it's pretty clear it's not obvious to me? So actually ending conversations with, hey, the last time everyone was this excited, I lost, over half my net worth. So I would like for someone to shoot some holes in this. Like, there's all the weapons, there's all the ammunition. I'm asking for it. Like, whoever can shoot the best hole in the story gets a bonus or Friday off. So then I learned, instead of like quashing rebellions before they could start, I would like, please, could we just have a little insurrection here? Could we just go ahead and push against this? And, if I'm really asking you to shoot some holes in this now, and I know that might seem uncomfortable, but the last time I didn't do that, it didn't end well. So I'm going to go ahead. And many times after that, like, what about this? What about this? And it's like, ooh, that's good. That's gold. Yep. I missed that too. Thank you. Yep. Going to use that. Yeah, that probably won't buff, but I like where your head's at. Appreciate that. And then taking that plan after the holes have been shot and patch it back up. Like, yeah, those were successful because I asked for the dissent. I asked for a little bit of healthy conflict, because ultimately they're the ones that are going to have to fix it anyway. So why not get it where they want to up front before we deploy capital and people and time? So that was something that I learned. Even though in the military they do these after action reviews, what was supposed to happen, what actually happened, and what did you learn? That is the big thing from an after action review. But since it didn't happen yet, I was just in assumption mode, assuming that all this was going to be a 10 out of 10. And the truth is, it was like parts of it were a 9 or a 10 out of 10. They really were, but they weren't the structural parts that were actually going to make everything else. The underpinnings, the basement of that idea was a 2 out of 10, even though I had some 10 out of 10 sitting at the third or the fourth floor. But obviously, when you build a tall structure with a weak foundation, you have like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And that architect is famous for the wrong reasons. Let's just be clear.
So this reminds me of something that when we do Great Boss workshops, I talk about pretty extensively. And it's always a bummer when I when I take teams through the leadership and the management practices and they're like, no, no, no. Right. And so one of the first things that we talk about is creating an opening. I'm creating an opening. And we talk about the VTO, the Vision Traction Organizer. Now, I know in your story, you weren't running on EOS. You didn't have these tools. They weren't readily available. But I'm wondering if you could talk about how people can go deep with some of those tools and use something like the VTO as the mechanism for hole punching, like you were asking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the beautiful thing about a VTO, like 2 pages for an entire multi-million-dollar business plan, like every business school person just starts twitching when you're like, I did not pay 200 grand for an MBA to fill out your silly little document here. This is like the Fisher Price MBA. I've heard it called so many, it's overly simplistic. And then I usually hit them with the Einstein quote where, hey, if you can't explain this to a toddler, you don't have command of the subject. You're like that kind of Einstein thinking. And the beautiful thing about the VTO is if you can't just look at the VTO and be like, wow, this makes perfect sense. The goals are in alignment, the sales growth, the EBITDA growth. We're going to add 100 people. We're going to triple the company and our EBITDA is going to go up at the same time. It's like, you ever heard of the rule 30, the rule 40, right? It's your EBITDA plus your growth percentage together equaling a number, because usually when you're in hyper growth mode, you're not in hyper profit mode. You're actually invested in that stair tread, right? You have to build it before you walk on it, right? There's some investment that happens. So usually that's where you look at the VTO and you're like, oh, 8 million to 47 million in 1 year. Well, are you buying 17 companies bigger than you? No. Well, this looks a little aggressive to me. So like, tell me how you're going to do this. Well, we're just like, we think we can do it. Like, I love you, but like, don't show this to anyone else. They're not going to take you seriously. Why don't we think about 20, 30% a year for 3 years in a row? And by the way, a lot of people would say that's aggressive, but at least it's realistic if you want to get after it. And I can sign up for these numbers. So that VTO, when you see a really great one, you read the whole thing and it's just like, yeah, I see it. You can actually see it. And when you got a VTO that's a little too big on the vision and not big enough on the traction, you're like, bless your heart. What about this? What about this? What about this? So the neat thing about what we do every quarter, now annually, of course, we recast the 3-year picture and the 1-year plan. And don't you know, the second time we do that, it's a lot tighter than the first time, right? Because you don't know what you don't know. And after a year of running on EOS, that second time, that's why so many people just changed the date, because it was a beautiful vision. It was just, you needed a whole nother year of your actual team and capital to do what you thought we were going to do last year. So that's why, like, the first time you're supposed to roll them back and push back a little bit, but also it's kind of like, no, I've pushed back enough. I'm going to let you do it. But I'm going to have a big fat I told you so next December when we sit down and say, okay, remember last year when I thought this was maybe a little bit aggressive? Now, does everyone understand what I'm thinking? And now I don't have to say it again. They're like, everyone's like, yeah. Okay, great. So now that we know what's real, let's do this again. But this time, let's get within 5%. And then they do.
Yeah. And I think too, there's a way to bring this down into the departments, even the lower levels of the organization, and put that 3-year picture in front of people and say, what are we not seeing here? There's something that that I don't know is a really big problem, and that needs to get fixed first. So what is it?
Yeah, that's a great way to do it, Beth, especially if they manage the finance department and you've got some stuff on there that like, ooh, this has got my name next to it. We're going to have to roll that back a little bit, right? Because now when people are assessing their name and perhaps their performance review, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, why did you let me do this? When you put someone's name next to the goal, what department owns this, it gets pretty real pretty quick. That's why, like, another concept, we haven't talked about this in EOS in a while, but it's still a thing. The departmental plan is where you just take the VTO and you just use the traction side. Everyone shares the front side, the vision side. But if I'm the sales leader, I just now have the traction side. And that 1-year plan is just the sales goals, those 8 to 12 goals, and then the rocks, those are our current rocks, and then those are our long-term issues. So like, everyone gets your departmental plan, and I need you to sign off on that because you are in charge of the finance department. I want to see your departmental plan. And if every leader has a departmental plan that they think it's realistic, right? They're putting their name on it. It's well thought out. You've allowed them to shoot 87 holes, right, in it, and and fix what they need to put their name on it, then you do that work into the big VTO, that goes really well because now every functional leader has said, yes, my team can do this. And if you want me to raise that, then this is the additional resource I need to do that in the percentage commensurate to the ask. So when I work with larger organizations, that's what we do. And it tends to be a much better first experience. And they have that almost that second year of experience. If you say this is actually, you're signing up for this. If your department fails, the company will fail. And if 3 departments fail miserably, then we might have overspent, we might have over leveraged capital. This could be really bad. So that's why the compartmentalization of EOS is exactly that. If you as a leader LMA 3 people, and all 3 of those people are pinch myself level 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10 level employees, right people, right seats, you're good to go. But it's the 4s and 5s that we hang around for a little bit longer, and then a bunch of serious stuff heads their direction, and we wonder why it hits the ground, and all the other people are like, I don't know what happened. And that's the beauty of EOS, is it allows every boss to LMA their direct reports and have that same. And if that's being done at all the different levels of the company, there shouldn't be any 3s or 4s on the team, right? If people are doing it, we still find them in the wild, don't we, Beth? But that's the assumption. But that just goes back to compartmentalization and why EOS is so great, is it makes it so crystal clear. And then once we have that, people either opt into that or they opt out and they go somewhere else. Because if we don't have the commitment, according to Pat Lencioni, right, then we can't have the accountability, the one above it. And usually people hire us for accountability. And really the question is trust. Can people be vulnerable? Can people enter into healthy conflict? Then they can get the commitment, and then the accountability is easy peasy once they are committed. If people aren't committed, you can't hold somebody accountable to something they don't really give a shit about. And then those results are at the top, quoting Pat's work. So that's kind of my take on that is it is exactly that bullet shooting opportunity to say, this is our VTO as a leadership team, ultimately signed off by the integrator, because the integrator was the one that's going to be held accountable for profit and loss, runs day to day the business, right? The salesperson signs up for that revenue number. The marketing person signs up for a lead number that's required for the revenue number, right? And then operations has to deliver process and efficiency to maintain profit. And it's that integrator, that conductor, who brings it all for the whole organization. And anyone running a business that doesn't have a VTO that's been signed off by each of the department heads, you're gambling.
Right. And we have an example of a visual example of what one of these looks like in the rollout book, and not to provide a plug to the rollout book, but it's a missing piece for a lot of the companies. And when I teach this in rollout workshops and things like that, I just did one recently, and people were like, what departmental plan? What's that? And so when they hear the concept and they're like, oh, it's like you can just hear the tumblers all falling into place, because they're like, if I can use this in my department and we can come up with a departmental plan, that's going to get everybody involved in setting their own rocks that are going to support the plan for the department, which are then going to support what the company is, trying to get accomplished this quarter. And you can just kind of hear everything just falling into place. And the other benefit that I find with departmental planning that people don't think about at the onset, but it's such a problem for so many of my clients, is strategic thinking, right? So they're like, well, I've got a bunch of doers on my team. I don't have anybody that's thinking strategically. And, I always ask the question, like, what opportunities are we giving them? Or are we just disseminating from on high, this is what we're doing, you go do this, and they're just waiting for their orders, right?
Yeah, that's a great point you make. And This is like a question I have early on for my visionaries when I meet them, as I talk about the leadership team, the management team, and the greater team. So being a former Army sergeant, sergeants are the middle managers. They take the wish of the officers and make that synthesize into a doable mission that's safe, that the troops can actually pull off. And sometimes the officers don't like to hear, yeah, maybe next year, sir, right? But without the sergeant checking on it, there'll be lost lieutenants, and like it's really important to listen to someone with lots more experience. And the sergeants spend more time with the troops than the officers do. Same thing in EOS, the mid managers. Like I know you've done a million great boss workshops because your partnership with Renee, and like lots of great LMA coming out of Chicago there for sure. But what I was like, okay, here's a scenario. When you're going to make big change, you're going to roll out EOS, you're going to install a new ERP, you're going to buy another company, you're going to do big stuff that everyone needs to be told. Do you bring the sergeants in a day early, the morning of, and say, hey, this is what we're doing, wanted to bring you into the tent. Does anyone want to just save us from ourselves? We're going to do something really dumb. Do you want to shoot some holes into it? At least just communicating. And when they're like, no, I said, okay, just imagine your sergeant, someone that's been there for 10 years. They have a team of 5 or 6. Like for those 5 or 6 people, that mid manager is their world. Like that's where all this stuff comes from. They LMA them. They're in their meetings. Like they're taking the to-dos, all that stuff. I said, imagine your sergeant sitting in the meeting, you unload some new information, and then the troops all look at them and say, hey, what do you think about this? And you're forcing them to say, I don't know. I'm getting this the same time you are. Are you really my manager? Like see, so I give that scenario, and like it's 8 out of 10 times, Beth, they're like, no, we don't do that. So we're going to start doing that. When we do, before we roll out EOS to this whole company, we're going to have a monthly managers meeting with the leadership team. It's an hour and a half. What's working, what's not working, high spots, low spots. Here are the rocks. What are the impediments? So before we share the rocks, that's why we do like a pregame before you see your implementer. We have the session, 2 or 3 days to sleep on it to make sure it seemed like this was a good rocking session. Well, after getting up the next day and telling everybody what you signed up for, oh, someone's getting married, so-and-so's, in 2 seats. Like, so I always sleep on the rocks. Don't share them for a couple of days. Then go to the state of the company meeting 2 or 3 days after your quarterly session. Then get all your quarterly conversations done 2 or 3 days after that. So if you can, see your implementer, have your state of the company meeting, which is, where we were, what we said we're going to do, where we're at, what we learned, where we're going, let's go have some fun. And then everyone gets to have a one-on-one. You can do that all within a week and a half, 2 weeks at the most. Then you can be fully into the next quarter. And that's why I have people do like team week. Yeah. And all that pushing back on the rocks and the VTO, all that needs to happen with the input of the managers before the leaders just get up on stage and tell everybody this awesome stuff's going to happen this quarter. And then how many times, like after that, the sergeants are waiting at the door. Like you realize we can only do about half of that. Like much better to bring them in the room before you get out the microphone and tell everybody. Like there shouldn't be an eraser next to your VTO. It should be ink, and it should be fully dry before you share it to the team. And with my teams, that means talking to the middle managers, because if you don't treat them as a separate group, they will start to Stockholm syndrome with the team. And then it's just the leadership team versus everybody. And that is not how you build a world-class company.
That's right. Mid-managers will either carry the ball or they'll drop it.
Yeah. And if you don't let them pick their number, they'll fumble it on purpose just to watch you lose, because like that, good team behavior is everyone assuming that we're all here doing positive things for the greater good. And sometimes humans, when they're not listened to, they don't have enough sunshine, water, food. Sometimes you think they're activists, but they become terrorists after you've mistreated them long enough.
Wow, valid point. Wow, this has been such a great conversation, Chris. I've learned so much, and I like how you approach, working with your clients about rocks, and I've learned a couple things that I might bring to some of my teams. So thanks for sharing. And hopefully the listeners got some good nuggets here too. All right. So I want to talk for just one more minute or two about some of the things that you're doing in addition to being an EOS implementer. Could you give me just like a quick 1 minute take on each one of the companies, GoXpand and Business Sergeant?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And since you don't want to plug the rollout book, I'm just going to take the first 20 seconds and let everybody know like. There's no reason you should be launching EOS without reading the rollout book. I think it's about 10 years late, but I'm happy it's here. And maybe that's not the official book to give on VB2, but I just went through a bunch of VB2s, and that's the one that I gave my people, and the feedback I got was like, yeah. So kudos to you and Marissa, who I respect greatly, and it's a beautiful book. So, all right. So on to GoXpand. So GoXpand is the fifth officially licensed software tool for EOS. It's different because it does all the EOS tools that the other guys do, right? I think it does it well. Scorecards have visualization lines, trend lines. Anytime we give you data, we also give you a picture. People are very visual. So dynamic, you can start with things and put in places versus more of a siloed approach. So all the EOS tools that you know and love with some additional support to give like an actual performance, alignment, and engagement score. So it's really taking the subjectivity out of yes, no, plus, plus, minus, minus, and people are just using these tools to then make a good EOS decision. So we're still doing EOS the way EOS should be done purely. It just gives you a little bit more data, a little bit more contextual, meaning if I have a team dashboard, up and to the right is the green. That's green is good, red is bad. But if you're in the red, why, and what do you need to do to get to the green? That all supports the EOS stuff. So EOS tools that dovetail with a bunch of human performance tools. So these 200 plus best place to work awards my clients won because they all used one of the EOS tools, and they're all wonderful, by the way. Like they're all perfectly usable, and everyone's got Ford or Chevy and whatever they like. Do you? But my best teams would use pulse surveys, like a Tiny Pulse or a 15.5 or a Perform Yard for quarterly and annual performance managements, and some different tools here, some different tools there, but they wouldn't use all the apps, just part of them. So I assembled all the human apps and put them together with the EOS tools, and then added an agentic AI agent. So a closed AI workspace. You just put your process there. People ask the brain. So it knows what's going on at the company, and it knows process. So it's just all that together. So it's kind of like a super tech stack curated, and people can use all of it or just some of it. It's kind of a choose your own experience. That's what GoXpand is. Business Sergeant is a veterans community where we train folks that are still in, just got out, or like me, been out a long time. And we translate military experience into civilian experience. And they go through a leadership academy and then a community. And then we place them at veteran friendly companies. My partner is a Silver Star, Purple Heart, recently retired Green Beret, and he has access to some of the finest leaders on the planet. And they can learn what your company does in a quarter or two, unless you're doing like nuclear fission or molecular biology. If you're just doing business, our people can learn what you do in a quarter or two, but your very best leader wouldn't survive a weekend with one of these people. So that's kind of the value add. So given, superhuman leaders, positions, general manager, integrator, department head, project manager, those roles. So that's what I've been doing because, being an EOS coach, even with a full practice, it's kind of a part-time job. I don't know if anybody wants to say that, but the clients that I coach, right, when I had my company, 60, 70, 100 hours, that's not uncommon for folks working on a leadership team. So even with the full complement of clients, it's not that many hours. So I work better when I'm busy. So in the last few years, but I'm also the visionary of both of these organizations, Beth. I learned from my short stint as an integrator to stay away. And, I have a software company that integrates GoXpand. They're fantastic. Stephanie and Trevor, full-time at GoXpand to serve the EOSIs and the community. And then Michael, my Green Beret integrator. So you can be a visionary if you stay in your lane. So I love that I'm become more entrepreneurial in the last few years after, being a coach in so many rooms. I've been kind of itching to give it another try. The good news is now, full circle, this interview. Okay, what's wrong with this? Who actually has to do this? Do you like the idea? How do you want to do it? Oh, I wanted to do it this way. End result's the same, do it your way. It's no longer my way or the highway. It's how would you like to complete it? And this is where I'd like you to be. You fill in the stuff in the middle. So I'm actually learning. This is really exciting to actually take something away from these lessons. So EOS has helped me EOSify some businesses that weren't a bunch of them, like 125. And now that I have some businesses that I technically, I guess I'm in control of, that's scary. I have awesome integrators and they do the work. So I can just sit back and have ideas and they're like, maybe next week, maybe never. And now I'm living the dream, not just selling it or coaching it, which has been exciting for me.
Good. And you're putting people like integrators who really do love to do the execution part, right?
They love to solve problems. And you're like, the more gnarly, nasty the problem is, the more they get excited. So it's just like if it's really complex, they love complexity. And there's not a lot of life and death on the line. I just might point that out, that if they can be successful in the harshest environments on the world, give them a comfortable office with air conditioning and a recruiting budget and watch what they can do.
And a better haircut.
And a way better haircut. Exactly.
All right. Well, last question. I ask all my guests this question. If you were to get a tattoo somewhere on your body that either reminded you of the story you told or something that was just significant to you that let us know who you are at a deeper level, what would that tattoo be and where would it be located?
Oh, gosh, that's a good question here. A tattoo. I would probably get a tattoo on my chest and I'd write it backwards so I could read it every day, right? Stay humble, be kind, and, give grace or something like that. It would be some sort of just a daily mantra reminder to me. I have a similar sign in my bathroom that I look at, and I would just want to take that with me because it's just a little reminder, right? Don't get over your skis, as we say in Colorado. Don't get ahead of your skis, keep some balance in your life.
Very good. I love it. Well, thanks again for being on the podcast. And thanks for sharing your story and many stories around being an entrepreneur and how you're helping other entrepreneurs. I think it's really noble work.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on your program.
Thanks to Chris Hallberg for reminding us that falling in love with your own ideas can blind you to what your business and your people actually need. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend who needs to hear this. Thanks for listening to Bad Boss Confessional. We'll see you next week.